Sharon never believed in blind dates. She'd seen too many of them end in awkward silences, forced smiles, and half-hearted excuses about early mornings. Yet, somehow, this one felt different. Maybe it was because her best friend, Tessa, had practically sworn on her life that this mystery man was the one. Or maybe it was because Sharon had spent the last 6 months pouring herself into work, forgetting what butterflies even felt like. The city outside her apartment pulsed with life, lights glimmering like scattered diamonds, taxis honking impatiently, the faint sound of laughter drifting from distant rooftop bars. It was a Friday night, and the world seemed to be in love. Everyone except Sharon, or so she thought. She stood in front of her mirror, smoothing down the fabric of her soft blue dress. It wasn't too revealing, but it brought out her eyes, the ones people always said could speak even when she didn't. Her dark hair framed her face in loose waves, elegant but effortless, the way she always liked it. She took one last breath and whispered to herself, "It's just dinner, not destiny." The restaurant was the kind you needed a reservation for weeks in advance, Lune Noir, all soft lights, rich wood, and the faint scent of vanilla and jasmine in the air. Sharon arrived 5 minutes early, clutching her clutch bag like a shield. She was nervous, but she masked it well. Years of working in the corporate world had trained her to hide her emotions behind composed smiles. "Table for 2, under the name Daniel," she said softly to the hostess. The hostess smiled. "Of course, ma'am. He's already here." Sharon's heart skipped a beat. "He's early?" That was a good sign. Men who showed up early usually cared. As she walked toward the corner booth, her heels clicking against the marble floor, she saw him, tall, poised, and effortlessly confident. He looked up from his phone, and their eyes met. Something inside her fluttered. He had the kind of presence that made the whole room dim around him, sharp jawline, eyes that were deep and unreadable, the faintest curve of a smile that hinted at both charm and danger. He stood up as she approached, pulling out her chair like a gentleman from another era. "Sharon?" he asked, his voice smooth, calm, with a trace of warmth that disarmed her instantly. "Yes," she said, smiling. "And you must be Daniel." "That's me." His smile widened slightly. "It's really nice to finally meet you." As they settled into conversation, Sharon found herself surprised by how easy it was. There were no awkward pauses, no forced laughter. He was attentive, genuinely listening, not just waiting for his turn to speak. They talked about everything and nothing, favorite books, places they wanted to visit, funny office stories that made them both laugh out loud. He had that rare ability to make time disappear. And yet, there was something about him. A certain air of familiarity she couldn't quite place. The way he carried himself, confident but grounded, reminded her of someone she knew, someone she'd seen countless times but never really met. Her company's CEO, Damian Cole. The thought made her chuckle inwardly. Of course not. Damian Cole was a billionaire. The man sitting in front of her might have the same quiet authority, but he wasn't her CEO. He couldn't be. What would a man like that be doing on a blind date? Still, every time Daniel looked at her, there was something behind his gaze, like he was holding back a secret, something he wasn't ready to say. Dinner melted into dessert, and dessert into another round of drinks. The conversation turned softer, deeper. He asked her what she wanted out of life, what made her happy, what scared her the most. No one had ever asked her that before. "I guess," she said, twirling the edge of her glass, "I just want peace. Not perfection, just someone who sees me for who I really am. Not the woman who hides behind reports and deadlines." He leaned forward, his eyes searching hers. "And do you think you've found that tonight?" The air grew still. Sharon's heart raced. She didn't know how to answer. There was a connection between them, undeniable, electric, and real. It scared her, but it also felt like something she'd been waiting for without realizing it. She smiled faintly. "Maybe I have." His expression softened. "Good. Because I haven't felt this in a long time either." They sat in silence for a moment, just looking at each other, no words, no need. The kind of silence that says more than conversation ever could. When the bill came, Daniel reached for it immediately. She tried to protest, but he only smiled. "Next time, you can pay." "Next time?" she teased. He grinned. "You're not getting rid of me that easily." Outside, the night air was cool, and the city buzzed softly in the background. He walked her to her car, their footsteps falling in sync. At the door, he turned to her, hesitation flickering across his face. "Sharon, I had a great time tonight." "So did I," she said softly. He seemed like he wanted to say more, but instead, he took her hand gently, brushing his thumb over her knuckles. "Good night." "Good night, Daniel." As she drove home, she couldn't stop smiling. The night replayed in her mind over and over again, the laughter, the warmth, the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the room. It was too good to be true. And in a way, it was. The following Monday, Sharon woke up with that same lightness in her chest. She'd been thinking about Daniel all weekend, wondering when he'd text again. She even checked her phone more times than she cared to admit. At 8 a.m., she walked into the glass skyscraper that housed Cole Industries, clutching her coffee and reminding herself to focus. This was her world, sleek, competitive, and fast-paced. She worked as a senior analyst in the marketing division, and her work had always been her safe space. The elevator chimed as it reached the top floor, the executive suite. She wasn't usually up there, but she'd been asked to deliver a quarterly report directly to the CEO's office. It was unusual, but she didn't think much of it. She knocked once before stepping inside. And then, she froze. There he was. The same eyes, the same smile, though this time sharper, more controlled. He was sitting behind the glass desk, wearing a tailored suit that screamed power. The man she'd shared dessert and laughter with, the man she thought was Daniel, was sitting in front of her as Damian Cole, her CEO. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched, heavy with disbelief. "Sharon," he said finally, his voice lower now, almost careful. "I guess I owe you an explanation." Her mind spun. You're my CEO?" He exhaled slowly. "Yes. I didn't plan for it to happen this way." Sharon's throat felt dry. "You lied to me." "I didn't lie," he said quietly. "I just didn't tell you everything." Her heart pounded. Every emotion from that night, the warmth, the connection, the butterflies, collided with the realization that the man she'd opened up to was her boss. She turned to leave, but he stood up quickly. "Please, Sharon, wait." She stopped, her back to him, breathing hard. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted one night where someone didn't see him, the CEO, the billionaire, the man everyone treats differently. I just wanted to be seen as a person." She turned slowly, meeting his eyes. For the first time, she saw something vulnerable there, something real. "I didn't mean to deceive you," he continued softly. "I just didn't expect to meet someone like you." Sharon stood in silence, torn between anger and the pull of everything she'd felt that night. Her world was spinning, but beneath the confusion, one truth remained: her heart still raced when he looked at her. For the rest of that day, Sharon could barely think straight. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, not the charming Daniel from the restaurant, but Damian Cole, the CEO everyone at the company admired from a distance. The man who commanded boardrooms with calm precision, who rarely smiled, who seemed to live in a world far above her own. And yet, he had sat across from her, listening, laughing, holding her hand like any other man on a date. It felt like two different people, and she didn't know which version was real. By the time she got back to her office, whispers were already circling. The CEO had personally called her in for a report, something that had never happened before. Eyes followed her as she passed through the corridor, her colleagues' curious looks burning against her back. She forced herself to stay calm. She'd always been professional, always earned her place. She wasn't about to let anyone make her feel otherwise. But inside, her heart was chaos. The next few days were quiet. She didn't hear from Damian. No texts. No calls. Not even a polite check-in. It hurt more than she expected. Each morning she told herself to move on, to bury herself in her work, to pretend that night never happened. But every evening, when the office emptied out and silence filled the floor, she'd catch herself glancing toward the executive wing, wondering if he was still there, working late like always. And most nights, he was. Sometimes, their eyes met briefly across the hallway or in the elevator. He'd give her a small, regretful smile, one she tried not to return. But her heart betrayed her every time. One Wednesday evening, long after most of the staff had gone home, Sharon stayed behind to finish a presentation. She was exhausted, her shoulders aching from hours of staring at her laptop screen. She didn't hear the footsteps until he spoke. Working late again? Her breath caught. She turned, and there he was, standing by her desk, his tie loosened, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Cole," she said, keeping her tone formal. "Just finishing up the quarterly summary." He smiled faintly. "You don't have to call me that when we're alone." She looked away. "We're at work." A quiet pause stretched between them. He stepped closer. "Sharon, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But I never meant to hurt you." Her voice trembled. "You should have told me the truth." "I know." He sighed. "But that night was the first time in years I felt like a normal man, not someone who's admired or feared, just seen. You looked at me like I was human." She said nothing, her throat tight. He continued, his voice softer now. "You told me you wanted peace. I haven't had that in a long time either. You made me remember what it felt like." Her heart twisted. She wanted to believe him. And part of her already did. Still, she forced herself to speak. "You can't expect things to just go back to how they were. I don't even know who you really are." "Then let me show you," he said simply. "Not as your boss. As the man who fell for you that night." Her eyes widened. "You what?" He met her gaze, no hesitation this time. "I've been thinking about you every day since that dinner, Sharon. You're not someone I can forget." Her chest tightened, torn between disbelief and the undeniable truth that her heart was beating faster than it should. She swallowed hard. "This isn't simple, Damian. We work together." People would talk. "Let them," he interrupted gently. "For once, I don't care what people think." There was a long silence. Then, finally, Sharon exhaled. "I need time." He nodded slowly. "Then I'll give you that. But I'm not giving up." Over the next few weeks, Sharon tried to distance herself. But Damian, he kept finding quiet ways to show up. When her department faced impossible deadlines, he approved additional staff. When she led a project that succeeded, he personally congratulated her, in front of everyone. And sometimes, she'd find small gestures that felt personal, her favorite coffee left on her desk, a handwritten note of appreciation. He never crossed boundaries. He never pressured her. He simply showed consistency, a man who cared not with grand gestures, but with sincerity. And little by little, her walls began to crumble. One Friday night, the company hosted a charity gala at the downtown ballroom, chandeliers glittering, music soft and elegant, everyone dressed to impress. Sharon attended reluctantly, not wanting to draw attention. But when she walked in, wearing a deep emerald gown that shimmered under the lights, the entire room seemed to pause. Including him. Damian's breath caught as he saw her from across the room. For a moment, the noise faded, there was only her. He approached slowly, his steps measured, his eyes never leaving hers. "You look breathtaking," he said quietly. She smiled, shy but warm. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself, Mr. Cole." He chuckled softly. "Damian," he corrected. "Please." They danced. Slowly, carefully. The world around them blurred, executives, investors, the buzz of champagne glasses, none of it mattered. All Sharon could feel was the rhythm of his heartbeat against hers and the quiet truth in his eyes. When the song ended, he leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "You told me once you wanted peace. Maybe that peace isn't something you find alone. Maybe it's something we build together." Her eyes softened. "You really mean that?" "With everything I am." For a long moment, they just stood there, two souls who had collided by chance, tangled by truth, and somehow, against all odds, found their way back to each other. Weeks passed. Their relationship unfolded slowly, quietly, away from gossip, away from boardrooms. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, moments where Sharon questioned if their worlds were too different. But Damian never wavered. He included her in his life, not as a secret, but as someone who grounded him. She learned that behind the empire, he was a man who read poetry at dawn, who volunteered anonymously, who carried loneliness beneath his confidence. And he learned that Sharon wasn't just another employee. She was strong, resilient, and full of quiet fire, someone who had built herself from the ground up and refused to lose her identity in anyone's shadow. They balanced each other, the billionaire who learned how to feel again, and the woman who taught him that love wasn't about status, but sincerity. One evening, months later, they returned to Luna Noir, the place where it had all begun. The same soft lighting, the same faint scent of jasmine. But this time, there was no pretense. No hidden names. No secrets. As they sat across from each other, Damian reached across the table, taking her hand gently. "Do you ever regret that night?" he asked. Sharon smiled. "The blind date? Never. Even if it started with a lie, it led me to the truth." He looked at her for a long moment, emotion flickering in his eyes. "You changed my life, Sharon." She laughed softly. "I think we changed each other." And in that quiet corner of the city, where it had all started with a blind date and a hidden identity, they shared a kiss that was no longer forbidden, no longer uncertain. It was love, simple and real. The city lights glowed around them, as if the world itself had decided to celebrate. And for the first time in a long time, both of them felt exactly what they'd been searching for: peace. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and subscribe to Whispers of Love by Cassie, where every story whispers the language of the heart. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new love story that will touch your soul.